Hello, and thank you for letting me back into your homes and onto your devices once more. What you're about to witness are a series of distressing stories inspired by real-life victims who were left traumatized by harrowing events. Each one steeped in reality, making them all the more horrifying because you won't find any monsters here, just people. Perhaps it's the pizza man at your door, or somebody on the road that you just drove by. Maybe it's a person that was at the restaurant you just ate at, or someone staying at one of the motels you're in. These things could happen to you. The following is not suitable for children. Welcome to
Fears to Fathom.
In the stifling heat of a midsummer evening, 14-year-old Miles was home alone. His parents had left for a weekend work trip, trusting him to handle things on his own. The clock read 8:03 p.m. when his alarm shook him awake. Late for dinner, but not too late to salvage what felt just like another quiet night. After opening all the doors in his house, he prepared food and ate with the TV. Just routine. Everything was still. Apart from Miles and the TV, it was silent. Like a hill. The kind of stillness that makes you forget that you're alone. Until he saw movement. Someone, something, was walking upstairs. He went to check, but the halls and rooms were empty. No sound, no shadows, just the hush of a house that seemed to be holding its breath. So he went back down, thinking it was nothing, and finished his meal, then returned to his room to study. It was probably nothing.
I was just a kid. I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, so I brushed it off, but then...
At 1:16 a.m., Miles woke again, thirsty. He shuffled downstairs for a glass of water, but when he passed the living room, something was off. The TV was on. But not just on. It was in debug mode, like somebody had been inside of it. That wasn't how he left it. Still in a groggy daze, he went back upstairs. When his phone buzzed, it was a text from his mother. He froze, breath caught, heart racing. He ducked under the bed, trying to make sense of it. Then came the doorbell. He thought it would go away, but it was relentless. Eventually, he dared to peek. Crouched near the window, he saw an older man standing on the porch.
I figured he needed help, so I opened the door. But that was my biggest mistake.
Is what he would have said if he had gone through with it. But something stopped him. A noise upstairs. The creak in the floorboards. Then his parents' bedroom door swung open. The lights flickered on inside. The front door wasn't a threat. It was already inside. Panic surged. He grabbed his phone, texting his mom for help, but she'd already replied. The police were on their way. Everything would be all right. And just before the worst could happen, they arrived. Officers swept the house, but nobody was found. However, in the master bedroom, the window was wide open. Whoever had been inside that house had vanished without a trace. Miles was safe, but he was never quite the same. Because once you've heard footsteps where there shouldn't be any, the silence of being alone never feels safe again. But miles away, on a quiet highway detour from a gaming convention, Holly's silence was about to be broken too. Not by footsteps, oh no, but by headlights. And no, it wasn't because she was texting and driving. Her father wanted her to stick to the main roads, but Holly was tired, traffic was heavy, and she wanted to just get home. So she took a more scenic and out-of-the-way route, isolated, empty. The only other vehicle on the road she passed was a white van that sped by and disappeared into the rear view. She didn't think much about the whole solo road trip, but being a woman driving alone at night, every little thing does matter. She would stop at a gas station to fill up. Inside, the air was still. A fellow shopper stood, seemingly stuck, deciding what he wanted, unblinking, unmoving, unresponsive. But then, the clerk spoke up. He warned her to be careful, because people had gone missing on the road that she was about to take. He said there was a monster, something that would snatch you up, hang you upside down from trees like a warning, like a trophy.
I thought he was just trying to scare me. Plus, I would be in my car, I wasn't going to stop for any reason, but then I looked outside and saw a white van parked next to my car. I figured it was odd. I'd just driven past the white van a few miles back. How many white vans could there be out at this hour? And they weren't even pumping gas, but I just never thought anything like this could happen to me.
She bought drinks and snacks for the road. Before she left, the clerk warned her to watch out for a lady in white and to never stop for hitchhikers. Upon stepping outside, she saw a man rushing away from her car, back to the van. He had been there, tampering with her vehicle before speeding off.
It was strange, and I was concerned, but what was I going to do?
For Holly, perhaps she should have called and texted everybody. Maybe she should have gone inside to contact the police. Staying at the gas station in the public eye might have saved her from what was about to happen. But she filled up her car, got back on the road, tried to keep calm. However, up ahead, a red car was crawling along, too slow, too deliberate. She flashed her high beams, then gave him a little nudge. He sped up, then disappeared. But the road just stretched on, endlessly, and something wasn't right. The radio cut out. Her headlights flickered. Holly wasn't doing this herself. The car was seemingly acting on its own accord. Then, the path ahead was blocked. 2 giant logs deliberately placed. She got out, dragged them aside, got back in. But the car wouldn't start. Dead. No service, no lifeline, just the moonlight haunting her. She waited and hoped in eerie silence as whatever hid in the shadows unseen watched her. One car practically would drive right through her, not even slowing down. But at 10:43 p.m., another one stopped. It was the man from the gas station, a familiar face, but trust was no longer simple. Still, she had no choice. She loaded her bags into his truck, gave her a ride. Eventually, they arrived at a rundown roadside motel, somewhere she could make a call, somewhere she could rest. Before leaving, the man gave her one final warning: to be careful. There are all kinds of people out here. She checked in, got her key, watched some TV, tried to feel normal, but then she went to the bathroom, and she found something else, someone else. A man was standing inside, quietly, with the door closed. He said he was cleaning things, but Holly was confused because she watched an entire episode of Superman, and not once did she hear anything in the bathroom. However, he told her to get her things and that he would be done soon, but nothing felt right about it. Eventually, she tried to rest, but sleep never came, because there was someone outside her window, peering in and watching her. When she turned to face him, he walked away. But Holly wasn't done. She stormed out, chased him, watched him vanish into a motel room, and locked the door. Her skin crawled. There would be no sleep tonight.
I thought a hot cup of coffee would help.
And normally that would be the case, but on this particular night, she was going to regret this. Right next to that man's room was a coffee machine. She made an espresso, drank it. But the second she turned, everything spiraled. Her vision twisted. Her body wouldn't obey. She could barely walk. She staggered to her room, collapsed into bed, and then slipped into a shallow daze until 3:18 a.m. The phone was ringing, a harsh sound cutting through the stillness like a blade. She sat up, groggy, disoriented. Her limbs felt heavy, her thoughts slow. The espresso was drugged, and the effects still lingered in her system. That's when she noticed something was wrong. Her things, they weren't where she left them. They were now neatly placed by the bed, organized, as if somebody had tidied the room while she slept. And then she heard it. A soft slide, then a low thump. The closet door closed, and she froze. That sound shouldn't have happened, not on its own. The phone kept ringing, so she forced herself up, answering it. But on the other end, nothing. No voice, no breathing, just static silence. She set the phone down, walked to the closet, every step slower than the last, and then she opened it. But it was empty. Turning to check the bathroom, she pulled the door open, half expecting someone to be standing behind it. Also empty. She let out a sigh of relief, but when she turned around, the man from the window wasn't outside anymore. But luckily, that didn't happen. Not yet. Instead, she heard a knock at the door. She crouched, looked out. It was the hotel manager. She opened the door, ready to tell him everything. But before she could get a word out, he barked at her, saying the other guests were complaining about noise. Then, he noticed her eyes, bloodshot, dilated. When she told him about the coffee, he froze, alarmed, and said that they don't have a coffee machine. He demanded to see it. But first, she would try to show him the closet, only to insist upon the coffee machine. So she took him outside. But as she turned back, she saw a man leaving her room, walking off into the night. She wanted to follow him, and she did, to a white van, headlights on. The same van that she passed by on the road, the same one that was at the gas station. It was now here at the motel. But the manager didn't address it. The coffee machine, though, gone, vanished. And something clicked, because right in front of the room where the man was staying was the red car, trunk open. The same car from earlier, the very same one that Holly bumped into on the road. It was all connected. But Holly would return to her room, took the pills from the drawer, laid down. Sleep never came. From fear and adrenaline, she watched the window, waiting for the worst. And then, worst came. Slowly, methodically. And then, he stopped at her door.
I thought to myself, this was it. And this is how I die. I should have never taken that detour. I could have been home in bed, safe and cozy. But this is it. But my body moved on its own and I hid in the closet. I sat there holding my breath, trying to be as quiet as possible, hoping that if or when he found me, the worst that he would do is just give me a quick and painless death.
And so she waited, chilled to the bone. But he didn't leave. He continued to bang on the door until he broke it down. And then began searching. She watched him step into the bathroom. But that's when another man came in. It was the manager. He snuck into the room, and as the man emerged, he took him down. Swift, confident, no hesitation. Holly was safe. The police were never called, though, because the manager didn't want attention. He did not want any questions. But Holly suspected something more, something deeper about that town. But what she knew for sure was that she'd never take another road trip again. Airplanes are safer. Staying home is safer. Well, maybe Miles would disagree. Perhaps Noah would argue against that too. Because on one September night, when Noah was 18, he had an encounter that would haunt him for the rest of his life.
But it began with this nightmare. I still can't explain it myself. I'm at this laundromat, and it's just me in here, and then I open a door, and it leads into this endless stretch of washing machines. So I just keep walking, and then eventually I see him, a man. He just keeps asking me about bleach over and over again. He's getting more agitated. He needs bleach for some reason. And then I hear my dad's voice pulling me out of the nightmare, and it's the next one. And suddenly, I'm falling off of the world into infinity and beyond. I look up and I see the world above me, the houses, the lights, the trees, and around me is the sunset, but I keep on falling until I wake up. But what happened next was worse than any of my little nightmares, because this was real.
Noah was house sitting that night, hired by his dad's associate Roy. The job was simple: feed the dog, Zeke, make sure the place stayed intact. But things don't stay simple for long. You see, Noah had a girlfriend, Evelyn, but the memory of his ex, Kara, still lingered. The guilt was there, something unresolved, something he wouldn't admit even to himself. After feeding Zeke, Roy texted, said his computer needed fixing. Not entirely part of the deal, but Roy did promise a nice tip. Besides, the house was full of cameras everywhere. It could be useful. Later that night, Evelyn messaged him. They watched a strange show together, virtually, texting back and forth. That's when Roy would send another message. He needed groceries. Again, outside of the scope of their agreement, but Noah went out anyway. 9:22 p.m., he arrived at the store, but something caught his eye. A girl. Familiar, walking out. Distracted by her, Noah got hit by a car. It wasn't serious, so he got up. But it was only the first of many close calls that night. As he steadied himself, he saw it. A white car pulling out of the lot.
I couldn't shake this feeling that whoever was in the car was watching me.
Inside the store, he ran into some old friends. They told him something unsettling. Kara, his ex, was just there. She bought a bunch of beer, enough for a party. She was nearby. His friends would then invite him to hang out, but Noah declined, returning to the house at 9:46 p.m. Later, his friend messaged him to look Roy up online, so Noah did. Turns out Roy was going through a very nasty divorce. His house was plastered all over social media. He was getting death threats. Then, a doorbell rang. He checked the camera. It looked like a pizza man. He also saw the pizza delivery car out front. But this was strange, because Noah never ordered pizza. Something felt wrong. He grabbed a can opener from the kitchen, his makeshift defense, and opened the door. No one was there. Crouched on the side window, he would see a man standing in the shadows. Noah flashed his light, but the pizza delivery specialist was unresponsive, so he approached him. The man handed him the pizza, but then asked if he could come inside. Just until the rain passed. Noah said no, firmly. After the man left, Noah ate the pizza, tried to settle his nerves, but then another knock. However, this time, it was flowers. He tossed them into the rain before coming back inside, but then Noah started to receive weird texts from an unknown number. The tone was casual, flirty, girlish. Letters replaced with "you," too familiar, too personal. But he ignored it, so immersed in his schoolwork that he didn't even realize how late it had gotten, past 1 a.m. But then the power went out. Zeke was barking outside, agitated. Noah would step out to check the breaker, but he made sure to shut the door behind him. However, when he turned around, hearing a creak, the door was opened. Someone was in the house. So he searched the rooms, the backyard, found nothing. Flipping the breaker, he restored the power, but heading back inside, he heard a door slam shut. And then, another text. Unhinged, erratic. So he kept looking around the house. He opened the door to Roy's studio. But then, a girl would attack him from the darkness. Or so he imagined, but instead, he actually peeked through the door into the studio. That's when he saw somebody behind the door. A girl, standing in the sliver between the door and the wall, staring at him. But he didn't go in, so he shut the door, walking away.
I had schoolwork to do, and I was probably just overthinking it. I thought it was my friend Turner playing a trick on me.
Despite the evidence right in front of him, Noah thought he was just being paranoid and an overthinker, that it would stop on its own, that if he ignored it, it would just go away. But she didn't stop, and she didn't go away. Soon the oven turned on, so he went downstairs to turn it back off, trying to ignore the feeling in his gut. So he messaged his friends, told them to cut it out. However, they weren't behind it, they were all together, and nowhere near him. That's when the realization hit him. This wasn't paranoia. But instead of calling the cops or just leaving, he went upstairs, still believing it was in his head. But his body wouldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so he checked the cameras, and what he saw nearly stopped his heart.
I felt my heart skip a beat. I kept staring at the screen in pure horror.
There she was, at the door. Kara, his ex, unwell, unstable, holding a knife. Jealous, drunk, unhinged. She pounded on the door, saying that if I can't have you, no one should. Terrified, Noah would sneak into the laundry room and hide. He would wait until she was just out of view, and then he bolted, out the door, down the street, where his dad would call the cops. However, when they arrived, she was already gone. But Noah remembered everything, except her face apparently. They'd met online. She was older, things turned dark. She turned to hard drugs, and when she couldn't let go, she tried to take him with her. Now for this story, this time, there was justice. The criminal was caught. But could we say the same about Jack Nelson's case? Jack was a state park ranger posted in the Pacific Northwest, fire watch duty at Ironbark Lookout. However, fires weren't the only thing he needed to keep his eyes on. For Jack Nelson, his RV wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of freedom, of solitude, of a life on the move, in sync with nature. He didn't mind the quiet. He welcomed it. Driving through the winding forest roads, not a single other person or car in sight. He felt peace, stillness. This was his life, and he liked it that way.
During my transit to my next duty station, I wanted to stop off at a diner. After parking, I decided to admire my RV, especially the bathroom. It was really convenient. Stepping outside, I even took a second to admire my parking job. No one could reverse park like I could.
Before heading in, Jack struck up a conversation with a man enjoying his burger. After hearing that Jack was a ranger, the man asked if he'd heard the news. 3 kids had recently gone missing at the park, vanished. No clues, no traces. It wasn't just a rumor either. Inside, another man brought up the same thing. Recent, real, and unsettling. But even more unsettling still was a man enjoying his meal with a shovel. Who brings a shovel to the diner? Jack tried to talk to him, but he got no response. After finishing his own meal, Jack noticed the shovel man using the bathroom before leaving. Jack would then pay and head back to his RV. But then, something caught him off guard. The door. He was sure that he had shut it, but now it was opened. He stepped inside, checking things over. When he tried to use the bathroom, the door was jammed. Something was off. But instead of thinking deeper, he chalked it up to a misstep. He shut the door and then drove off. By nightfall, he finally arrived. Stopping at the trailhead sign, he saw the missing posters for the kids who had gone missing. Britney Spears, Hugh Jasmine, and Sanita Williams. He went into the office to check in, only to be startled by another ranger who thought Jack was someone else, or something else. But the tension faded when he realized he was just the transfer. But before Jack could relax, he caught something in the corner of his eye through the window in the dark of the woods. There was a man walking alone. Just far enough to blur the details, but close enough to feel wrong. As Jack stepped closer, the trees swallowed the figure whole. With his check-in complete, he was given directions to Tower 11, his new post. But before leaving, the ranger gave him a warning to not go too far north of the tower. Jack wanted to believe that it was just a joke, a bit of local lore to scare the rookie. But there was something about the way he said it, the dead look in his eyes. It stuck. The hike to Tower 11 was long, the forest darkened, the cold sharpened. But then, at the edge of a clearing, his tower stood tall against the moonlight. Sanctuary.
Firewatch ain't easy. It's not glamorous. You're isolated out here for weeks, months at a time. It's not for everyone. But I didn't mind it. All I had to do was ensure that all conditions were normal in the forest. And I love the solitude. I probably couldn't do this if I had a wife, though.
And with that I can concur. I love my wife. Jack settled in, ran through the logs, completed his checks, routine. Then, the radio crackled to life. Connor, from Tower 12. Friendly voice, lonely too. They made small talk. Jack even found time later to play video games. Minutes to midnight, everything felt normal. Jack was just doing what everyone did when they came here. But, at 3:26 a.m., that changed. It started small. Strange voices crackling through the air, incomprehensible. Then Jack stepped outside. Nature called. The forest was quiet, still. But then he noticed something. A shadow. The shape of a man in the distance. Watching. Jack lifted his binoculars, saw it clearly. Someone was staring directly at him, before vanishing back into the trees. The next day, Jack enjoyed his coffee from the top of the world. Birds danced across the red and purple skies, the treetops swayed in silence, and for a moment, everything felt okay. But peace in the woods never lasts long. Because Connor's voice would break through the radio. He had spotted smoke in the distance, and then he asked Jack to investigate it. Unregistered campers most likely. At 8:37 p.m., Jack arrived at the site, but as he approached, he heard a scream, blood-curdling, sharp, human. But ignoring it and moving forward, Jack's phone lit up with texts. He had service here, just in this spot. There had been a fire, still glowing faintly in the dark. Signs of an encampment, but no people. That's when he heard it. Whistling. Long, breathy, off-tune. Someone was nearby. Jack held his breath, stepping slowly towards the sound. But as he got close, the whistling stopped. And footsteps shuffled away into the woods. He put out the fire, searched the clearing, and found a radio, tuned in to his tower's frequency. For Jack, this was off-putting, knowing that someone had a direct line to him.
I couldn't shake the sense that there was something terribly wrong.
He returned to the tower at 9:07 p.m. and reported everything to Connor. But Connor brushed it all off, saying that the screaming and whistling he heard were just the animals, that he's overthinking it. Jack would then make dinner. Tried to go to sleep, but at 2:27 a.m. something woke him up. A sound. Whistling. Again. He opened his eyes and through the window he saw it. A shape. Tall. Thin. Almost inhuman. It stared into his tower, and then it moved around the structure, slowly dragging steps. Outside the door it crouched down, leaving behind something. A twisted black shrine, made of bones and wire. When he felt that it was safe, Jack opened the door, bear mace in hand. Nobody was there.
I didn't know what to make of it at the moment. I told Connor, but again he brushed it off, said it was probably kids. Kids, out here, in the woods. He knew we were isolated, he said it himself, in the middle of nowhere, but he didn't care.
The following night, at 8:34 p.m., a call came in. A hiker, lost. Jack gave him directions, but then the man paused, saying that he heard whistling. Before Jack could respond, there was knocking at the door. He opened it, mace ready. But it was just the ranger from the front gate, dropping off supplies. The night was freezing. Jack needed firewood, so he would walk down to the storage shed. But on his way out, someone jumped in front of him. A man, and he looked familiar.
My mind was spiraling out of control by this point. I could have sworn, though, that his face looked familiar. He looked like that guy from the diner, the one with the shovel. But again, what were the chances?
The man introduced himself as Silas, said he was doing routine maintenance. His words were strange. His tone was eerie, spoke in riddles like somebody brainwashed by a cult. And just as he was about to leave, he said Jack's name, which was strange, because Jack never told him his name. He would report this interaction to Connor, but of course, again, he didn't believe Jack. 1 week later, at 2:34 a.m., Jack spotted another campfire deep in the woods, so he raised his binoculars, and that is when he would see them. People, dozens of them, wearing white hoods, standing in a circle. A cult. He needed proof, and so he took out his camera, raised, focused, but he forgot to turn off the flash. With a bright burst, every hood turned its head. And one of them began sprinting towards the tower. Jack panicked, dove under his bed. Moments later, a thud. The heavy boots hit the floor. The cultist was inside. He paced the room, slowly, steadily, searching. And when the footsteps finally moved outside, Jack bolted for the stairs. But the man was waiting for him.
Huh?
Jack turned and ran, through the trees, towards the entrance, desperate, gasping. But he still wasn't safe. The cultist was right on his heels. Jack panicked, saw the RV, jumped inside, turned the key, and floored it, never looking back.
And I tried to tell the other rangers, but they said it was just isolation, playing its tricks on my mind, said I was imagining things. Still, they did send people out to check, but of course, they found nothing. So I was told to stick to just looking for fires. The rangers didn't believe me, my family didn't believe me, but I know what I saw, and I never set foot in those woods again.
After everything, Jack survived. He knew better than to trust the silence of the woods. But Sydney Harper didn't. She wasn't a ranger, she wasn't trained, and she wasn't prepared for danger. She was 23, alone, exhausted from work and just looking for a quiet place to breathe. To her, a cabin in the woods wasn't a threat, it was a break, a reset, a safe weekend with old friends. But evil doesn't always howl in the distance. Sometimes it knocks politely, sometimes it opens the door for you. Sometimes it waits inside, smiling, with the keys in hand, for the low price of only $99 a night. On a cold December night, Sydney Harper was still at her desk. Overtime again. Just her, a lukewarm coffee, and the sound of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. That's when her old friend Mike called. The three friends had a plan, a weekend cabin getaway in Woodbury. Just her, him, and their friend Nora. Just like old times. But for Sydney, there were complications. Because for Mike, it was never just friends. He pushed, insisted, created little opportunities for something more, even when she'd already said no. Just like tonight when he offered to pick her up from work, to carpool in the cabin. By 4:36 p.m. they were on the road. Mike made small talk, trying to stir up nostalgia. Sydney focused on her phone, texting Rick, the B&B host, letting them know that they were on the way. They would stop at the local pizzeria, sharing a booth, ordering food. While they waited, a text came in from Nora, saying that she was going to be late, being held up at work. Not ideal, but not the worst thing that would happen tonight. Because then, a man approached their table, a hitchhiker, asking for a ride. Sydney might have said yes, but Mike didn't hesitate. A hard no. A right and sane decision. But that's when the hitchhiker's mood shifted instantly. He was vehemently upset. Even though Mike was the one that said no, his frustration wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at Sydney. Before he left, he gave them a warning, to be careful out there. But it didn't sound like advice. It sounded like a threat. Sydney would drive the rest of the way, her hands tied on the wheel, out of practice, but determined to feel in control. And when they arrived at the cabin, something felt off. While exploring the house and checking the rooms, they would go down into the basement, where they would find a locked door. Sydney couldn't shake this feeling that somebody was already in the cabin, and upstairs she would open a door and jump back, scared by the man who was standing there.
He said he was looking for his cat. Then he said he wanted to fix the TV. But we rented this place. He shouldn't be here. He started showing us around like it was okay for him to be here when we paid for our space.
The old man was the supposed host, Rick. However, something about him felt wrong. When they asked about the door in the basement, he got defensive. And then, he told them that the previous owner's mother had died down there, and that sometimes you could still hear things. Voices, movement. Now before he left, he asked Sydney for her name. Said he'd forgotten, so she gave it to him. But later she would check the text. The man that they'd met didn't line up with the Rick that she's been messaging. Still, she brushed it off. They tried to relax. Late night cooking, a Ouija board in the basement. While playing with the Ouija board, the two would get scared, and Mike, not even worried about Sydney, would rush out of there to save himself. But Sydney would just shake her head. This entire trip, this distraction, it was working. Until it wasn't. While fishing, Sydney noticed a figure on the bridge, a man with a backpack. He stopped and looked right at them, and then he kept walking. Was it the hitchhiker? But later that night, while playing hide and seek, Sydney saw something that made her blood run cold. A man, inside the house, walking by casually like he lived there. Dismissing the game, she flashed her lights to alert Mike and then quickly ran out. But Mike didn't take her seriously. Then, upstairs in the bathroom, the old man appeared again, unannounced, unbothered, unapologetic. Said he was fixing the faucet with a hammer. Mike snapped, threatened to call the police, but the old man only smiled, saying that there were no cops in Woodbury. And then he left. The damage was done. At 11:39 p.m., Sydney wanted to sleep, but Mike had other plans. He knocked, let himself in, closing the door behind him. She didn't want to be in the room with him. She tried to take the conversation outside of the cabin, even choosing to freeze to death, than to be alone in the room with him. However, while out there, she would notice a hatch that leads down to the basement. It made her realize that somebody could slip in and out of the cabin unnoticed. However, Mike would insist on staying in the room, telling her to sit down on the bed with her. She resisted, but he talked anyways. She tried to change the subject, tried to make it clear again that she wasn't interested, but he kept on pushing, insisting, brought up their time in Oregon, when they were drunk, when things got blurred. Before things got worse, a voicemail came through from Lily Pichu.
I think I'm about 70 miles away from Woodbury and my stinking tire just blew out.
Mike would get up to go, and Sydney would stay. At 12:39 a.m., something banged on the door. It was the hitchhiker, the same one from the pizzeria, from the bridge. He was yelling, demanding to be let in. said that he needed to get out of the storm, but Sydney refused, firmly, which only made him angrier. This unhinged man somehow followed her all the way from the pizzeria. He took notice that she was alone, that the only other man, the only other deterrent, was gone. He told her that her karma was coming, that she'd get what's coming to her, and then he walked away. Sydney, despite the dreadful danger, could no longer keep her eyes open, so she tried to sleep, but she was awoken again, screaming, then banging. She panicked and texted Rick, and only moments later, he appeared at the door. Sydney let him in. Scared, confused, and desperate, she told him about the hitchhiker, that he was trying to get in. But the old man just told her to not worry about him anymore. This unnerved and left Sydney feeling speechless. And that's when she noticed he was holding his hammer, instilling an even deeper sense of terror with her. But what made her even more uncomfortable was how comfortable he got by the fire. That's when her phone buzzed. A message came in. It was from the real Rick. He said that he was confused because he lives in a different city, hadn't even been to the rental in weeks. So Sydney froze. Who was this man in front of her then? She looked up. The man was smiling. He stepped forward, asked where Mike was. A woman, all alone. Sydney would then confront and state that he wasn't Rick. He got angry, screamed that this was his house, and that he would only leave when he wanted to. He ran to the front door, smashing the handle with a hammer. Sydney would have no way out now, so she ran to the basement, hiding beneath the stairs. He searched, and when he couldn't find her, he opened the mysterious door. This gave Sydney the chance to sneak out, but that's when her phone rang. It was Nora. The man heard it, turned around, and ran towards her, so Sydney sprinted to the bedroom, and she almost didn't make it. It was close. The old creep was looking around with murderous intent. But the sound of the doorbell distracted him. Mike and Nora had arrived. Sydney tried to move, tried to slip downstairs, but then her phone rang again, so the man turned back and rushed upstairs. Sydney fled into the attic. She texted everybody, telling them what happened, and somehow, some way, the man left, slipping into the woods. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. Rick, the real one, said very little. All he mentioned was that he knew who that man was, and then he gave them a full refund. No charges, no answers, just another video for you to click on because YouTube thinks you'll enjoy it.